Every who down in Who Newville liked the holidays a ton, but where to get great prices on gifts, they had no idea. None. They searched and they searched for great gifts under $25. Gifts for spouses and friends and even their toddlers. When suddenly one who shouted, Walmart has what you want, knowing they have Lego, Tree Hut, and no prices to flaunt. So they enjoy the holiday season as who's often do. Cheering and shouting, Walmart has incredible gifts. Who knew? Find gifts they'll love under $25 at Walmart.
This episode is presented by State Farm. Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like needing the protection of an offensive guard on the football field, but getting an elementary school crossing guard. Sure, they're both guards, but you can only trust one to keep your quarterback safe when the game is on the line. So don't settle for just any insurance when there's State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. If I get drunk.
What is up, Sooner Nation? Huge game on Friday, Oklahoma, Alabama. Both the Sooners and the Crimson Tide starting that quest for a national title shot. Only one team survives. Obviously, that means there's a lot to talk about in terms of this game on Friday night. But we've also got a lot happening on the hardwood as well. So last episode was all 4 segments football. Let me give you the breakdown because I know some of you guys like to move around throughout the podcast. I get it. First segment, last segment, football. The 2 middle segments, basketball. So if you want to fast forward, that's fine. I don't mind. Just make sure you give us a subscribe and you like the content and you give us a good rating. Just the same. It's all the same to me if it's all the same to you. So let's jump into this, though. When Oklahoma walked out of Tuscaloosa with a 23-21 win in mid-November, the reaction across the college football landscape was immediate and somewhat predictable, right? Alabama turns the ball over. The margin was thin. 1 or 2 plays go the other way, and suddenly the story becomes Oklahoma escapes rather than they controlled the outcome. And this is something that even on our Facebook page, I've got comments from Sooner fans who feel this way. So this isn't just coming from those, with the Crimson Tide. But reading that, having that perspective totally misses the point. Because when you slow the film down, when you remove emotion, the branding, or even other shorthanded explanations, what Oklahoma did that night was not accidental. It wasn't lucky, and it absolutely wasn't fragile. The Sooners were very intentional in what they did. And that wasn't a game where Oklahoma survived. It was a game Oklahoma designed to win. And even if it didn't look like the kind of, quote, statement win that casual fans have been trained to explain, it still was a win. And it was the win that Oklahoma dictated. And as these 2 teams prepare to meet once again on Friday night in the college football playoff, that distinction matters more than anything else. Well, the first thing that jumps off the film, when you go back and watch this game, the first thing that you don't see is aggression. Instead, from Oklahoma's perspective, it's all about restraint. Oklahoma didn't play Alabama like a team trying to make a statement. They played them like a team trying to control variables. There was assignment integrity, there was leverage, there was lane discipline. Eyes were in the right place. There was no reckless selling out for sacks. There was no gambling in coverage, and absolutely no desperate attempt to end the game with a heroic snap. And that matters against a team like Alabama because these teams, they live off of mistakes, particularly the mistakes that the opposing defense makes. You miss a gap, you lose eye discipline, you bite on motion, and suddenly a routine snap turns into a 40-yard problem. And Oklahoma refused to offer those gifts. Instead, what they did was they forced Alabama to snap the ball again and again and again. They shrunk the margin for error until the game lived inside Alabama's execution rather than Oklahoma's hope. That kind of defense, it's not flashy, but it travels. And more importantly, that's the type of defense, that's the type of performance that goes on to win in December. The box score, it shows turnovers. But the film, it shows pressure with a purpose. Oklahoma didn't stumble into takeaways. They benefited from random mistakes. What the Sooners did was they targeted stress points in Alabama's offense, and they applied pressure in ways designed to force decisions, not hope for things. Pass rush lanes, they were controlled. Coverage behind it was disciplined. Pressure arrived when Alabama at least wanted it to. And when the ball came loose, when a throw went astray, it wasn't because Alabama, quote, just messed up. It was because Oklahoma spent the entire night tightening the screws. Now, again, that difference matters, especially in a rematch. You can't bank on turnovers repeating, but you can bank on behaviors that create them. Oklahoma didn't gamble. They increased the odds, and eventually Alabama blinked. One of the laziest ways to evaluate football games is by total yards. Yeah, Alabama outgamed Oklahoma in November, and that stat has been used to dismiss the Sooners as their win as if it was unsustainable. But football is not about yards, it's about rhythm. And Oklahoma controlled when Alabama gained yards. Early downs were contested, third downs were uncomfortable, red zone snaps were treated like every inch mattered because they did. No cheap explosives, no sudden momentum swings, no avalanche drives that broke the game open. Every Alabama possession felt heavy. That's not luck. That's the control that we were talking about as we opened up this segment. And even the field goal, again, there's a comment on the Facebook page about, they were just a missed field goal away from losing this game. Maybe right, but it wasn't a missed field goal. It was a blocked field goal. So again, we got to give Oklahoma credit where it's due. And low-scoring games, they don't automatically mean offensive failure because that's the way we move in Sooner Nation when we talk about this offense. But sometimes low-scoring games reflect intention. Oklahoma never chased points in the first match with Alabama. And they didn't feel the need to answer Alabama with urgency. They didn't abandon their plan when the scoreboard stayed tight. Possessions mattered. They understood that. Field position mattered. Finishing drives, that all mattered. And just as importantly, though, limiting possessions mattered. Fewer snaps mean fewer chances for explosive teams to flip the game in just a matter of seconds. Now, that's an old principle, but it's lethal against teams built to avalanche points in short bursts. Oklahoma understood that the game, what they needed to do and how they needed to play. And they refused to deviate from it. And so the most important question heading into this playoff rematch, it's not, can Oklahoma get lucky again? It's what parts of this performance are repeatable? And the answer here is quite a lot. Defensive fundamentals, gap integrity, leverage, tackling, communication, those don't depend on opponent mistakes. They depend on preparation, pressure, and timing. Oklahoma didn't blitz consistently. They chose moments. That restraint is harder to prepare for than chaos. Situational football, third downs, red zone snaps, late game discipline, field goals, those weren't flukes, they were patterns. And how about this one? Emotional control. This might be the most overlooked piece. Oklahoma never looked rushed. They never looked panicked. They never played like a team begging for validation. They trusted their plan, and that doesn't disappear when you have a rematch. Now, that doesn't mean everything carries over cleanly. Some things broke Oklahoma's way. The short fields, the game flow, the freedom of being doubted. You've got a playoff rematch, and that removes some of this. Alabama's going to be sharper. Adjustments are going to be faster. Margins will be thinner. And Oklahoma, I believe, has to improve in two areas. They have to be more consistent offensively. They have to sustain drives without relying on field position swings. Doing that is going to make a big, big difference. And early down efficiency, winning first down, keeps the defense fresh, and it limits Alabama's ability to dictate tempo. Now, those aren't massive overhauls, but they are refinements, the kind that good teams make when the playoff starts in December. And let me tell you why this still matters. The danger of rematches is overthinking the first result. The danger of dismissing that first result is even worse, though. Oklahoma didn't beat Alabama because of randomness. They beat them because they played a controlled, intelligent brand of football that neutralized strengths instead of chasing headlines. And belief in a playoff setting, it doesn't come from hope, it comes from evidence. And Oklahoma has that evidence on tape. The first game between these two teams absolutely was not an accident, and neither will the second game be. This is the Sooner Nation podcast. Thanks for hanging with us.
Here's my 30-second story with Guinness. As soon as my sister and I get home for the holidays, we don't even unpack. We head straight to our pub. The bartender already knows our order, Guinness and fries. We laugh all night, catch up with old friends, and walk home with faces sore from smiling. It's one of my favorite nights of the year. That was my 30-second story with Guinness.
Guinness Draft Stout. Please enjoy responsibly. Imported by Diageo Beer Company, USA, New York, New York.
All right, as promised, we're going to shift gears for just a little bit and talk basketball because we've got Bedlam, we've got the Thunder losing to San Antonio. If you want the final segment on Oklahoma, Alabama, skip forward 15, 20 minutes, and you're going to be right there. But for everybody else, let's talk some Bedlam, right? If football is designed and disciplined, Bedlam basketball, it's got to be about survival. It's never quiet, it's never linear, and it gives you what you expect. And Saturday afternoon at Paycom Center, there was no exception to this. Oklahoma didn't beat Oklahoma State by overwhelming them for 40 minutes of basketball. This wasn't a wire-to-wire flex, and it definitely wasn't dominance in the traditional sense, but it was something harder. Oklahoma won this Bedlam game by answering every punch that mattered and by refusing to let one bad stretch become the whole story. That's how you survive in this rivalry. So let's start here, right? Every game has runs. Bedlam seems to magnify them. Momentum doesn't shift in inches, it swings like a wrecking ball. And Saturday, Oklahoma State made theirs. They made it more than once. They erased a halftime deficit. They outscored Oklahoma 16-9 to open the second half. They jumped ahead 51-50, and suddenly the building begins to tilt. You can feel it. The noise picked up, the confidence surged, and Oklahoma fans, it felt dangerously familiar. Because earlier this season, those moments, they didn't end well for the Sooners. That's the moment when Oklahoma unraveled. Those were the moments when urgency turned into panic. Those were the moments when one bad stretch became, five. But it didn't happen this time. This time, Oklahoma didn't flinch. And there's a possession that I want you to remember because it won't show up on a highlight reel. But around the 10.5 minute left, Weige goes up to the free throw line. He hits a pair. Now that free throw gives Oklahoma a 54-53 lead. And from that moment on, the Sooners never trailed again. Now that's not a sexy stat, but those free throws stabilized everything. What it did was slow the game back down. It stopped the emotional bleeding, and it reminded Oklahoma who was in control of the response. Right? Even if they weren't in control of momentum, they could control how they responded in the moment, and that's growth. Now, let's talk about Xzayvier Brown for a minute because the numbers here jump off the page. 21 points, 6 of 9 shooting. But the most important thing Brown brought to this game on Saturday, it wasn't scoring. It was really about timing. He scored when Oklahoma needed the game to breathe. He's got a layup at about 4:54 that left in the game that pushed Oklahoma's lead 72-63. Just enough separation there to force Oklahoma State into chase mode once again. And when OSU responded with a 13-7 run to cut at the three, Brown didn't disappear. He didn't rush, and he didn't hunt for shots. He stayed aggressive without forcing the moment. There's that balance. There's that balance that matters, because every rivalry game eats guards alive when urgency turns into recklessness. But Brown never crossed that line. He let the game come to him, and that steadiness, it was contagious. And if Brown's the stabilizer, you got to look at Nijel Pack. He was like the release valve in this game. Every time the Cowboys flirted with momentum, turning it into chaos, what did Pack do? He hit a shot that quieted everything. He finished the game with 18 points. He hit 4 threes in this game, and none of them were decorative, right? They were corrective. They showed up right when Oklahoma State threatened to speed the game beyond Oklahoma's comfort level. And after the game, Pack connected his performance to something deeper. The lesson that they learned after the Nebraska loss, right? They learned it the hard way earlier this season. And talking about that Nebraska game, here's what Pack said. He said that loss for us was huge. For us to give up 100 points, we learned from that. Today, we locked in on the defensive end. Again, if you're looking for things that matter as non-conference play begins to wind down, here it is right here. Because Pack didn't just talk about growth. He played like a player who was growing. He contributed to a team that is showing growth. Didn't try to erase runs in one possession. He trusted spacing. He trusted teammates. And when Oklahoma State made a mistake, he punished them for it. That's the leadership that you want from your star players. And the problem has been this season, not offensively. Oklahoma can score with the best, but defensively, who are they able to stop? And they, a couple of times, particularly Arizona State, their last time out, the defense wasn't good. And let's be honest about this game. Again, not Oklahoma's best defensive game of the season, but situationally, it may be the most sound. Because when Oklahoma State pulled within 79-76 with just over a minute and a half left, again, you got a razor-thin margin. And that's where earlier versions of this team cracked. Instead, what did Oklahoma do on Saturday? They got to stop. They ran a clean set. And after a timeout, Porter Moser dialed up a look that frees up Tay Davis for an uncontested dunk. And that dunk, it wasn't just 2 points. It resets the tone here. Oklahoma never allowed Oklahoma State to score again after that moment. And Moser sums it up perfectly after the game. He said, every time we responded when we took a punch. And that sentence right there, that sentence is the game. And Oklahoma didn't, we talked about Nijel Pack. We talked about Waggy. We talked about, all these guys that had big games, but they didn't solely win it on stars. There was a lot of energy and role clarity here. You've got guys on the field like Dayton Forsythe, right? Attack. None of these guys filled the box score, but they all mattered. You got defenders, you got guys spacing the floor, you got guys rebounding and chasing shooters that are not your star guys. And against a team that thrives on pace and chaos, the minutes that the bench gave were invaluable. Bedlam is not 5-on-5. It's about surviving waves. And what Porter Moser did with Oklahoma's rotation is they absorbed just enough impact to keep their footing. And yeah, I know what Oklahoma State fans are going to say. I know what they are saying. I know what they have said, right? That they played without their starting center. Sure, that matters, but you know what? That did not decide the game. Oklahoma State had 4 players score at least 16 points. Oklahoma State still had pressure at the rim. Oklahoma State still cut the lead to 3 late. Oklahoma, the Sooners, still had to finish, and that's exactly what they did. So what does this win mean for the Sooners? Again, not Oklahoma's prettiest win. It wasn't the most dominant win. It wasn't the most complete win, but it may be one of the most important. And here's why. We talked about this earlier. In this season, Oklahoma has lost games like this. Games where momentum swung violently and one lapse erased 35 minutes of hard work. Against Oklahoma State, that lapse never came. The Sooners bent, they absorbed, they answered. Now you're looking at a team that's got 5 wins in the last 6 games. That's on the resume. Wins over Marquette, wins over Wake Forest, wins over Oklahoma State, previously undefeated Oklahoma State, I might add. And all of those were won in different ways. Versatility matters. Because Bedlam, it doesn't reward perfection. What it does is it rewards resolve. Oklahoma didn't win because it controlled every moment of this game. The Sooners won because they controlled the response when control seemed to be slipping away. And again, there's the growth. There's the maturity that you want to see out of this team. And with conference play just on the horizon, that's the kind of win that travels. No, the Sooners didn't just survive Bedlam. They showed how to finish it.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. You're ready to move your business forward, but first, you need to find the right team. Start your search with Indeed-sponsored jobs. It can help you reach qualified candidates fast, ensuring your listing is the first one they see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. See the results for yourself. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, we're going to stick with basketball for just one more segment, and here's the reason why. Saturday night, something happened that Oklahoma City Thunder fans almost forgot was possible. The Thunder lost. Not just any game, but a 111-109 loss to the San Antonio Spurs in Las Vegas. It snaps a 16-game winning streak for the Thunder, and it hands Oklahoma City just its second loss of the season. Now, here's the important part right up front. This loss, this wasn't about effort. This wasn't about toughness, and it absolutely wasn't about composure. The Thunder had all of that. This loss was about math, shot profile, and what happens when one generational player tilts the geometry of the floor just enough to expose your coldest habit. So let's kill the lazy narrative immediately. Oklahoma City, they didn't play poorly. They defended, they competed, they stayed connected, and they didn't melt down late. They just couldn't hit shots. And in the NBA, that's not a footnote to your story. That is the story. The Thunder finished the night 9 of 37 from three-point range. That's 24.3% for those of you trying to figure it out. You don't need advanced analytics to know that's brutal. But here's what makes it uncomfortable. They weren't bad shots. They were open, they were in rhythm, and they were the exact shots Oklahoma City wants to take. Aaron Wiggins, Cason Wallace, two of the most reliable role players and shooters on the roster, combined to go 1 of 9 from deep. SGA, 1 of 7. Jalen Williams, 2 of 5. And when that many trusted shooters go cold on the same time at the same night, even the most disciplined team in the league can get dragged into a game that they don't fully control anymore. And San Antonio, they didn't stumble into this. The Spurs had a very clear defensive plan, and it revolved around one name, Victor Wembanyama. And with Wemby anchoring the middle, San Antonio is comfortable making a trade, right? What I mean by this is, by that is this right here. They would trade away the rim in exchange for conceding perimeter shots. Now, that's a dangerous gamble against Oklahoma City when the Thunder are making threes. Because when Oklahoma City hits shots, that coverage collapses, right? Rotation stretch, driving lanes open, and then the offense just snowballs after that. But when the shots don't fall, what happens is the floor shrinks. Late clock possessions, they begin to pile up, and suddenly the Thunder are grinding instead of flowing. And that's exactly what happened in Las Vegas on Saturday night. And we've seen this before, right? This is where Thunder fans should feel a little bit uncomfortable. Not panicked, but let's be honest, because this wasn't new. It looked very familiar. Think back to the NBA Cup final loss to Milwaukee last season. Same formula. The Thunder defended well enough to win the game. They competed possession by possession, but when the perimeter shots dried up, they couldn't generate consistent offense late. Saturday night followed that same blueprint. Now here's the difference. San Antonio had the perfect chess piece to exploit this. We're talking about Wemby, right? We're talking about a guy returning from a 12-game absence and he played just 21 minutes. But in that limited time, he put up 22 points, 9 rebounds, 2 blocks, and a plus 21. That's insane. In 21 minutes, they were plus 21 with him on the floor. Those numbers, they're beyond impressive, but they don't really, I think, capture his true impact. Because he didn't just affect shots he contested, he affected shots that he never touched. He bent Oklahoma City's help defenders without demanding the ball. He altered driving angles simply by existing near the paint. And he allowed San Antonio to guard Oklahoma City differently, more aggressively on the perimeter, more confidently in rotation, and more patiently in recovery. Now, here's the wild part. The Spurs outscored Oklahoma City by 20 points in the 7 minutes Wembanyama played in the first half. 7 minutes. That's not a coincidence. That is a gravitational pull. But despite all of that, despite the shooting, despite Wemby's presence, Oklahoma City still had a chance. They still had a shot in this game in the final minute. And here's, again, something that matters because it speaks to the Thunder's baseline. Even on a cold shooting night, even against a defensive scheme that was designed to test their worst habit, even with a generational big man warping the floor, Oklahoma City was still right there. That's not a failure of identity. That's a reminder of where the margins live. This loss was about shot profile, not character. Here's what you want to take away from this, Thunder fans. Here's what you should be sitting on right now as you prepare for the Clippers. This loss didn't expose a lack of toughness. It exposed dependence. Oklahoma City's offense is at its best when the three-point shot is a weapon, not the engine. But when it becomes the engine, the math turns a little bit fragile. Now, that doesn't mean the Thunder should stop shooting threes. I'm not saying that at all. What it means is the next step for this team, the contender step, is finding ways to bend defenses when those shots are not falling. Mid-post counters, late clock diversity, paint pressure without finishing at the rim. Those are playoff-type problems. And Saturday night felt like a playoff lesson, and it felt like it was delivered early, which is good news because that's why this loss matters. Also, it's the reason why it doesn't. Let me be clear here what I'm saying. The Thunder didn't lose because they weren't ready. They didn't lose because they weren't disciplined. They didn't lose because the moment overwhelmed them. They lost because basketball math turned against them. Wemby is uniquely equipped to punish that. That's not a red flag. It's just a reminder that dominance in this league is not about perfection. It's about adaptability. And Oklahoma City is still learning how to adapt when Plan A goes cold. Now, there's a bigger picture here, and there's good news here as well. The Thunder are still one of the league's most balanced teams, still one of the best defensive units, still one of the smartest, most composed groups. And Saturday night didn't change any of that. But it did reinforce something important. When Oklahoma City's three-point shooting abandons them, they can be dragged into a fight, even by teams below them in the standings. Not an indictment here, okay? Just information. And for a team with championship ambitions, information like that is valuable, especially when it arrives in January instead of in June. The Thunder didn't fall apart Saturday night. They just got tested. And sometimes the losses that matter the most are the ones that show you exactly where the ceiling still needs some reinforcement. Because the Thunder is still an elite team, They're just not a team that's immune to a bad night. And you know what, Thunder Nation? That's okay. That is A-okay. We're jumping back into football after this.
When the holidays start to feel a bit repetitive, reach for a Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry and put your twist on tradition. A bold cranberry and winter spice flavor fusion, Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry is a refreshing way to shake things up this sipping season. And only for a limited time. Sprite, obey your thirst.
As Oklahoma prepares for a rematch with Alabama in the opening round of the college football playoff, there's an assumption floating through the national conversation that feels almost automatic. Alabama lost once. Alabama will fix it. Alabama won't let it happen again. And here's the thing. That assumption, it's not lazy, it's earned. For 2 decades, Alabama has lived in the margins of preparation. When they lose, the response is usually surgical. Adjustments are made, weaknesses are addressed, and the next version of Alabama often looks sharper, cleaner, and far less forgiving. But there's a danger in leaning too heavily on that logic because adjustment alone does not guarantee control, especially not in a rematch where the original result wasn't random, wasn't emotional or accidental, but it was built on discipline, decision-making, and psychological balance. That's what Oklahoma did in November, and that's why this rematch is far more complicated than Alabama needs to fix it. The wrong question everyone is asking is this: how will Alabama adjust? The national framing has been really simple around this, but that's not the right question. Sure, Alabama's going to adjust. That part is obvious, but the real question is this: will those adjustments simplify the game or will it complicate it even further for the Tide? Because not all corrections lead to clarity. Some just move pressure from one place to another. In games decided by margins, that relocation really matters. Now, there's a lot of confidence around Alabama's response, right? And it rests with Kellen DeBoer, and fairly so. DeBoer has built a reputation as one of the most adaptable offensive minds in the sport. His teams, they don't chase volume for its own sake. They refine, they tighten, they evolve through nuance, right? Route combinations, they get sharper. Protections get cleaner. Tempo becomes a tool, not a crutch. And that matters in a rematch. So Alabama's not going to try to do more. They're going to try to do things cleaner. But here's the distinction that gets lost. Improving structure does not automatically restore rhythm. Rhythm has to be earned, snap by snap. And disciplined defenses like Oklahoma's, they are built specifically to disrupt that rhythm. And so let's start with the most obvious area of correction for Alabama, and that's going to be the turnovers. The first meeting was shaped by mistakes, and Alabama knows it. Oklahoma didn't just benefit from those areas, they punished the Crimson Tide for them. Short fields, sudden changes, a defensive touchdown, that's the margin here. So yeah, Alabama expected things to go differently, and ball security played a big hand in that. So expect Alabama to prioritize ball security. Quarterback reads, they're going to be safer. Ball carriers, they're going to cover up. Risks are going to be managed aggressively. But here's a trade-off with that. Explosive plays live on the edge of danger. So pulling those back reduces vitality. And sometimes vitality is exactly what Alabama needs to overwhelm an opponent. Safer football lowers the ceiling as much as it raises the floor. And that's not a flaw, it's a cost. The second likely adjustment is pace. In November, Oklahoma controlled the flow of the game. Alabama had moments of urgency, but they rarely sustained it. Drives stalled, rhythm reset, pressure mounted. The natural response is speed. Expect Alabama to test Oklahoma early with faster sequences, quicker snaps, and more scripted looks designed to force communication errors and generate early confidence. Now, that makes sense. But again, tempo cuts both ways. Faster pace compresses margins. It magnifies miscommunication. It increases the mental load. And against a defense that prides itself on alignment and communication, tempo is not just a weapon, it is a stress test, and stress reveals things. The first meeting between these two schools featured subtle mistakes, penalties, missed assignments, mental lapses that don't dominate headlines, but they do matter deeply. In close games, discipline doesn't just matter, it accumulates. Alabama will emphasize cleaner execution. Now, that's a given. But discipline under playoff pressure isn't the same as discipline in practice. Every mistake feels heavier. Every stalled drive adds weight. And when expectation stacks up, even well-coached teams, they can tighten. Now, there's an old belief in football that the team that loses the first matchup holds the edge in the rematch. They've been embarrassed. They've been identified through their weaknesses. They're motivated. But the reality of this is more complicated. At the highest level, rematches often favor a team that already won. Not because the loser fails to adjust, but because the winner plays with proof. Proof changes preparation. The team that won once knows the plan works. Their confidence is rooted in evidence, not in hope. The team that lost is chasing correction under the weight of expectation. That psychological shift is something that matters and makes a difference. The original winner, they play free. The original loser, they play tight. And tight teams rarely execute cleanly for 4 quarters. So, Alabama enters this game with obligation. They are expected to restore order. They are expected to reassert dominance. They are expected to look like Alabama again. And every stalled drive adds weight to that. Every mistake invites doubt. Every close quarter magnifies the pressure. Oklahoma enters with belief. The Sooners aren't seeking validation. They already proved that they can win this game. So they're not trying to change perception. They're reinforcing it. And then there's freedom in that, right? And that freedom matters. In November, Oklahoma never looked overwhelmed. Alabama, at times, did. That doesn't guarantee a repeat, but pressure has a way of resurfacing when the mistakes multiply. Now, here's the truth about adjustments. They often relocate vulnerability rather than eliminate it. So safer throws, what they're going to do is they're going to shrink windows. Faster tempo increases the mental load. Conservative ball handling reduces explosiveness. So every fix comes with a cost. And this is where Oklahoma's familiarity becomes an advantage. The Sooners aren't guessing. They've set the baseline. They've studied the counters. They understand the emphasis points. This rematch is not about Oklahoma reinventing itself. It's about recognition. Recognition beats reaction. Discipline beats desperation. None of this minimizes Alabama's pedigree. This is still one of the most talented rosters in college football. It's led by a staff that understands how to evolve under pressure. Alabama will be better in the rematch. But better doesn't always mean freer. And freer often matters more than sharper, right? So playing free means more than playing sharp, especially when the margin is thin. Oklahoma's win wasn't a fluke. It was built on execution, patience, and opportunism. Elements that will travel into the playoff, into this game. Adjustments they'll change the shape of this game, but they won't erase the reality that Oklahoma already solved the first puzzle. Now comes the harder test. Not winning once, but proving that it wasn't situational. And that's what makes this rematch worthy of the moment. Only game on Friday night. Only the first game of the college football playoff. ESPN game day there. The entire nation watching. Oklahoma has a chance, not just to relive the moment, but to own the night. Hope you enjoy the rest of your week, Sooner Nation. We'll be back. We got more to go, previewing this game, and obviously afterwards as well. Catch us online, heartland-sports.com. Find us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Heartland Sports. We would love to have you join those communities. Have a great week.